Hi, I'm Jared Wolf, Senior Editor and Assyriologist here at Museum of the Bible. As Senior Editor, I spend my days reading every letter of every word on every text panel, every label, every brochure, and every digital table in the museum. As an Assyriologist...
How old are the green ones?
No, wait a minute. Assyriologist. As an Assyriologist, I study the ancient cultures of Assyria and Babylonia, two cultures that had a major impact on ancient Israel and that show up in some significant ways in the biblical text. I find those ancient stories in texts and artifacts here at the museum, and I bring my favorites to you right here on The Bible Is So. Welcome back to The Bible Is So Impressed. In our last episode, we took our first look at a system of stamp impressions known as lamellic seals. Now, if you remember, following new research, we suggested that this system of seals may first appear during the reign of King Ahaz as a system to collect taxes to pay for the Assyrian protection as a vassal. Now, we saw how this shift is likely visible in the change from using a scarab as the central icon, which is an Egyptian symbol, to using a winged sun disk, which is an Assyrian symbol. In this episode, we're going to talk about how this system might have worked, and how Hezekiah might have made use of it during his revolt. Now, let me start by saying that scholars still do not have enough information to state with certainty the exact ins and outs of this system. However, there are a few clues that do help us sketch a basic outline, which has been presented, as we mentioned, in a recent publication by Professor Oded Lipschitz and his students at Tel Aviv University. So let's actually start with the jars themselves. You can see one right here, at least the top of it. So just like the seals are lamellic seals, we call this a lamellic jar. Now, there's some variety across time periods, but on average, these royal storage jars are about 1.5 feet to 2 feet tall, and they hold just under 12 gallons. And this would have been of wine or of olive oil. Now, each of these jars sports 4 handles, with one or more being stamped. And these stamped jars exist alongside thousands of unstamped jars. In fact, this one here is unstamped. And this type of jar itself had been developing over about a century, but it was taken and standardized more or less in the mid-8th century and beyond for the system of stamped jars that we're talking about. Now, one little last note of interest. When we analyze the clay that is used to make all of these jars, something called petrographic analysis, the results indicate that almost all of these pots, over centuries before the exile to Babylon, were all made in around the same place, possibly a site known as Tel Soko, which is one of the names we actually find on the seals. So that's a little bit about the jars. Now let's talk about the impressions again. So the first thing that scholars have focused on regarding this set of seals are the place names at the bottom. Now, in the last episode, we saw 2 of these names. We saw Hebron and the unknown Mameshet, as we decided to pronounce it. To this can be added Soko, and a seal that which is a seal we actually don't have on loan here, and a town named Ziph. So these 4 sites, Hebron, Soko, Ziph, and Mameshet, are the only sites that we have listed on these lamellic seals. Interestingly enough, though, we don't find very many of these seals at any of those sites. And so this has actually led scholars to suggest that those 4 sites are not collection centers, but are actually the main royal estates where these jars would have been filled with olive oil and with wine, and then have been prepared to be sold and exchanged for precious metals and luxury items that could then be used to pay the imperial tax. Now, we don't see these jars outside of the kingdom of Judah, so we know they aren't traded, but exactly how their contents are turned into these precious metals and luxury items, we're still a little bit fuzzy on. This will be an avenue for future research. Afterward, after they had been emptied and converted somehow, the jars are sent back to the estates to be refilled, and so the system goes and goes. And this becomes something that can be administered very efficiently. And as it develops, so do our stamps. Now, in the previous episode, we talked about how the scarabs and the winged sun disk with the early continuous writing are called early. Now, what leads us to that conclusion? To answer that, we need to visit Lachish and Hezekiah's revolt. Now, the Great Siege of Lachish will be another series on The Bible Is So, but for now, let's pop over to our images of the Lachish reliefs and have a quick history review. Here I'm standing in front of a portion of what are known as the Lachish reliefs, which capture some of the activity around the famous siege of Lachish. Now, around 705 or 4, when the Assyrian king Sargon II died in battle, several people took the opportunity to revolt, including the kingdom of Judah under Hezekiah and its allies backed by Egypt. Now, when he revolted, it's very likely that Hezekiah ceased payments and co-opted this system and instead used it to pay and supply his troops and his preparations, with collections, of course, centered on the massive fortified city of Lachish. Now, this revolt in the Levant was quelled by the punitive campaign of Sennacherib in 701, when he utterly defeated the armies of Egypt and utterly destroyed the cities of the agricultural lowland of the kingdom of Judah, known as the Shephelah, including its crown jewel, Lachish. Now, Hezekiah submits and he pays heavy tribute before, according to the biblical narrative, an angel of the Lord intervenes, kills 185,000 Assyrian troops, and the Assyrians retreat. Now, in terms of history, this was a terrible moment for Judah. Its agricultural centers were lying in rubble. The stiff Assyrian tax is still due annually, but now they don't have their agricultural heartland. How do they pay? Now, it's exactly at this time that we see Jerusalem and other cities in the highlands start to grow and become prominent and, in fact, even prosper as they swell with new populations and they rise to meet the production quota that is demanded to pay the Assyrian tribute and tax. Now, the stamp jars are going to continue, but with just a few changes. So if we just walk right over here, we can take a look. Let's look at the sealings we did last episode. We have 2 with scarabs and 1 with the winged sun disk. Now, on the winged disk, we notice again that the place name, Mameshet, is written continuously with no big gaps. Now, seals with this type of continuous writing and the lamellic on the top of a winged sun disk or a scarab are always found beneath the destruction layers of the cities Sennacherib conquered and destroyed. Now, this is most evident at Lachish, which has, at last count, 413 seals found in situ. However, in the layers after the destruction, these types of seals aren't seen anymore. Instead, they look like these. Now, the third seal is upstairs in the IAA exhibit, but we won't pop up there again tonight. Instead, here's a close-up. Now, notice the scarab is gone, never to reappear. And the winged sun disk remains a symbol of Assyria. But, and you may have already noticed it, the way they write the place name at the bottom is different. Now the letters are split, half to the left and half to the right. And this style of seal has, so far, not been found beneath the destruction layer of the cities Sennacherib destroyed, but only on top, afterward. And so this is the archaeological evidence for talking about an early style and a late style of lamellic seals. And to these examples of late, that is post-Sennacherib's campaign, seals, there are a few others to add that we unfortunately don't have on display here. Some of which only have lamellic at the top, some of which only have the place name, and sometimes it's on top. And to this system, even a couple more designs are going to appear in the time before the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem, after which this system of stamps undergoes much change. But it ultimately continues. And we'll talk about this final system and the chaotic years of the Judean monarchy after the collapse of Assyria in the third and last episode of The Bible Is So Impressed.
To learn more about the museum or plan your next visit, go to museumofthebible.org.